So, Episcopal Relief and Development, as I said, I'm going to give you just a New Jersey Turnpike tour of the history of Episcopal Relief and Development. We're not stopping at any rest stop for very long. That's what my dad always used to say when we drove in Wisconsin. Episcopal Relief and Development is going to be 81 years old this year. It was founded in 1940 primarily as a way to assist refugees who were escaping Europe during World War II. When the war ended, its mission expanded to include humanitarian assistance focused mostly on disaster relief. Fast forward to the 1960s and 70s, when there was a growing awareness in the United States of the challenges that people elsewhere in the world were facing, and more money came into the organization's budget, which at that time was not known as Episcopal Relief and Development. It was known as the Presiding Bishop's Fund for World Relief. And the concentration was on this sort of relief effort, post-disaster, helping folks deal with calamities and the immediate aftermath of those calamities. But in the 60s and 70s and heading into the 80s, the mission of the Presiding Bishop's Fund for World Relief changed and expanded and became more focused on sustainable development, in helping folks become more resilient to better navigate the next disaster. In 1988, the refugee assistance part of the Presiding Bishop's Fund, or so what some folks used to call the PB's fund, the refugee part of that organization was spun off into a new organization called Episcopal Migration Ministries, which still exists today and has a very specific function of resettling refugees from across the world. Now, these folks are not migrants. They are officially designated by the United Nations in what's often a year-long vetting process as refugees. And Episcopal Migration Ministries is one of 9 almost all faith-based organizations across the country that have major contracts with the State Department and other government agencies to provide resettlement assistance to those refugees. All of that is dependent on how many refugees are allowed into the country by proclamation of the president every year. And that's a whole nother issue that we could definitely talk about another time. The other thing to remember about Episcopal Relief and Development, even as it went into this development part of its name, is that Episcopal Relief and Development has never been a boots on the ground kind of organization, such as the Red Cross. Or sometimes you hear, after a major disaster, you hear about the Baptists coming in with huge semi-trailers and the Mennonites and doing rebuilding and all that sort of thing. The Presiding Bishop's Fund, and then now the Episcopal Relief and Development Organization, has decided long ago that it did not want to develop that kind of an infrastructure because it's, and I'm not knocking any other denomination that has, but it's expensive. You have to maintain that equipment, you have to store that equipment, you have to have enough volunteers and paid folk to run it. And so Episcopal Relief and Development has relied on sharing its expertise with folks in civil regions and dioceses to help them develop their skills and resiliency, and to use money that is granted from Episcopal Relief and Development in their local communities to purchase what they need and thus stimulate the local economy at the same time. In 2000, the PB Fund's name was changed to what we know now as Episcopal Relief and Development. And in 2002, it was spun off into a separate 503 501c3 organization for taxation purposes and budget clarity within the Episcopal Church. It's still headquartered at the Church Center at 815 2nd Avenue in New York. And a year later, in 2003, it began to shift from making small grants for small projects, both domestically and overseas, and moved into more of a implementing longer-term development projects, long-term partnerships with certain groups, be it other nonprofit organizations from the civic sector, be it a diocese in another part of the Anglican Communion. When Bishop Jennifer talked about going on this pilgrimage to Ghana, which I have also gone on, I went a few years after she did, and going to Bulgatanga. Bulgatanga is part of an Anglican diocese in the province of the Anglican Church in Ghana. And ERD partners with that. They have their own relief and development organization, and ERD has partnered with that group for years. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that in 2004 and 5, if you remember the tsunami in the Indian Ocean, and then in 2004, and then Hurricane Katrina in 2005, that was a big shock to ERD's system, but it recovered very well and has established long-running partnerships in both of those locales that are still operational today. And in the midst of all that, in the midst of those two major disasters, in 2006 was when they started the Nets for Life program, which Jennifer mentioned, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So with that, I think I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to, I'm not sure who's starting first. Is it Rick or Phyllis?
Hi, Mary Frances, it's Rick.
Okay,
Great.
good.
And Phyllis, are you there?
Yeah, I am here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm willing to start, or Rick, go ahead.
All right. Can I share the quick little 5-slide
Yes.
PowerPoint?
Yes, let me open that up. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Go. I just have to open it up. And then I'm going to come back to you, Rick, and share my screen. Okay, let me just move my screen. Let me close down that so you're not seeing all of us. And let me increase the size just a bit. How's that?
That's good.
Okay.
All right. So everyone, I'm not going to read every slide to you, but just to follow up on what Mary Frances said, the way ERD works is that, let's just take a look at this quote. Go with the people, live with them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they have, build on what they know. But with the best leaders, when the work is done, the task accomplished, the people will say, we have done this ourselves. So that's really part of the philosophy of ERD and how they work. Next slide, please.
Sure.
Currently, ERD has 3 priority areas, and they are these. The first one is women, and their major goal areas for women are promoting gender equality, creating economic stability, cultivating women leaders, and ending violence against women. And if you go on ERD's website, there's a lot of details with this. I omitted that, but there's a lot of details if anyone wants to see that. You can also email me and I can send more information on that. So priority area number 1 right now is women, and our next slide is children. And the major goal areas for children are improving food and nutrition, protecting health and preventing disease, empowering parents, creating economic stability, and protecting families. And the third major priority area is climate. And here, ERD seeks to improving food and nutrition, creating economic stability, providing access to clean water, hygiene, and sanitation, and reducing the impact of disasters, and managing environmental preparedness. And our last slide, this shows us that with ERD, the money is certainly well spent. Over 83% of the money that is channeled through ERD goes directly to program, and 11% is fundraising, and only 5.5% is administrative costs. So they're very efficient in how they manage the money that's donated every year. Okay. Thanks for sharing that PowerPoint, Mary Frances.
You bet. Here we go.
Phyllis, you want to take a turn?
Okay.
Phyllis, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Phyllis. Could I just say one thing, which I want to point out, is ERD does get high ratings all the time for the low percentage of the revenue that they spend on administration. And part of what allows that to happen is that, as I said, they're headquartered at the Church Center in New York, and because of the way that the budget, the church-wide budget, is structured, ERD actually receives a certain amount of in-kind, a large amount of in-kind contribution for their office space, for the telephone service, for human resources and payroll processing, and disbursement of funds across the world, that if they had to pay for that on their own, that percentage might go up a certain amount. So it's another one of those things that we all support by our pledging to All Saints, which goes to some of which goes to the diocese, some of which goes to the church-wide budget. So that's my pitch. Phyllis, it's all yours.
Okay, I'm going to take you for a few minutes down memory lane. Does Goats for Guatemala mean anything to anybody? Okay. In 2011, Neil asked Rick to get to see if he was interested in joining the Millennium Development Goals Task Force at the diocese, of which a lot of the benefit would be directed to Episcopal Relief and Development, short ERD. He asked me. Ed joined. At one point, Richard Derrick was a part of us, and we attended the meetings, we got involved, and that's how Goats for Guatemala came out. I was looking for a project we could do for the church that was not wildly expensive or wildly invasive in people's time. And I met someone, she had done a project similar. She put a can at coffee hour out, she put a poster out, she wrote a letter in the newsletter, and all they asked for was 25 cents. 25 cents to purchase an animal out of the Gifts from Life catalog. I said, we can do that. So I chose goats. I chose South America as a direction because it's our hemisphere. And we came up with Goats for Guatemala. I put the can, the poster. I thought $80 to buy a goat, we can easily do that. I didn't count on the children. I didn't count on the church school or the kids in the parish. They ran with this. By the second week, parents were coming up and saying, I don't have change to buy a newspaper when I go to work tomorrow because my child wants every dime out of my pocket for the goats. And I smiled, but whatever. We wound up earning $405, which was enough for several goats. Goats only cost $80. So I took Gifts for Life catalogs back to the classrooms and I said, you've got some leftover money. Choose what you want. And then the kids blew me out of the water. They did a cost-benefit analysis on the animals. So they analyzed between, we already had the goats, between chickens or bees. Now, chickens, Okay, a chicken lays an egg, you can eat it. A chicken lays an egg, you can sell it. A chicken lays an egg, it becomes a chicken. When this chicken is old and tired and dying, you can eat it, you can make food with it and sell that. Okay. Bees. Bees don't even need seeds to feed. If you put the bees in an area where there's clover or whatever they're going to eat to make the honey, you watch the bees make the honey, you take the honey, you sell the honey, the bees make more honey. It's a continuing process. This is what the kids were analyzing as to whether to spend the extra money on one or the other. They wound up buying both. We wound up buying a flock of chickens and we wound up buying beehives. But it was an amazing experience from just supposedly a quarter to wind up with that. So that was one of our introductions to the community on using the Millennium Development Goals as a source for information so that we could raise money to benefit the ERD. I talked a lot about the Millennium Development Goals. They were important to us at that time. It was a slide, just a side info. It was originally 185 nations that grew to be 190 nations that agreed it was important to cut extreme poverty in half. And they gave themselves 15 years to do it, from 2000 to 2015. And they used as the benchmark whatever was extreme poverty in 1990. That was the year they used. Anybody in 1990 living under $1.25 a day counted as extreme poverty. Okay, show of hands. Did the Millennium Development Goals beat that? Did they make that goal? How many, with their show of hands, believe that by 2015 they cut extreme poverty in half? I'm not counting hands, am I? Very few. Okay. Yes, they did. Not only by 2015, they beat it by 2010. Now, again, that leaves the rest of the half of the world still living on only less than $1.25. So it's not a complete success, but it was a success for the goals. So we moved on to other projects. Another project I want to talk about is what Mary Frances built on, and that was Pennies to Prosperity. And that was a microfinancing project, and it was worldwide. And I'm going to name something in Africa and also something in Guatemala. In Africa, they created a loan project called Pennies to Prosperity, in which you could purchase a donkey set. A donkey set was a donkey, a plow, and a cart. And a villager could use all three of those together to plow their field, to harvest their field, and then using the cart also to take the products to market, to sell. In many countries, if there is a family member who has a job, very often the job is away from the village. So the family member leaves the village, say on a Sunday, comes back on a Friday, is there with the family for several days a week, but the wife, the older parents that are left behind are the ones who are responsible for the household and the farm. By taking a loan, women were able to purchase a donkey set. As I said, the donkey, the plow, the cart. With that, they gained the ability to determine how, when, and where they would plow, they would grow their products, they would harvest them. Eventually, they would also be able to rent this set out to neighbors who hadn't bought one yet and actually make money off of the donkey set. They could use the cart to, as I say, send everything to market. If they grew products, they could send the raw materials. If they made stews or in other parts of the country, breads and things like that, they could take the finished product, carry that to the market, sell it. They could actually make cash. Number one, with the cash, they had to pay back the loan. Number two, with the cash, in many parts of the world, education is not free. Families were sending their children to school, not just their boys, but the girls could then go too, because there was money for that. and there was money for seeds, and there was money to maybe buy a stove that didn't create carbon monoxide in the area and therefore was a safer product. They could improve their lives on their own terms with this loan project. It was a terrific, terrific asset for these areas. Okay, number two, very quick. Same idea, but it was a community bank, and it was back in Guatemala. We're in Guatemala again. A community bank. You had to put money into the bank. It was in your account, just like we have an account here in the US. It was in your name, your money. When the money was accumulated, you could apply for a small loan. Maybe you wanted a well. Maybe you wanted to buy seeds for growing more crops. You got your loan. You could raise your products. You could make your bread. If it was South America, maybe you were going to make tortillas. You could sell them at the market. With the food that you were growing in your garden, maybe you could now make a stew, sell that at the market. Again, the idea was you could, on your own, determine your own schedule for making a product, developing it, selling it, and taking the cash back. Again, off the top, right off the top, you had to pay back the loan, and weekly, you had to make a small donation into your account. You had to grow your money. At the end of the year, there was a split. Everybody could take their money back or leave it there. That was fine too. But you got a percentage of all the money that the bank, the community bank, made by these loans. You took out a loan, you had to pay a percentage, you had to pay the loan back with the extra percentage. That went towards your accounts and all the accounts, so that at the end of the year, people actually made money. In addition to what they sold each week in the market, they made from the idea of the bank. They had to take courses to learn about finance. They had to learn about making a deposit. They had to learn about what would be the interest rate on their money, what would be the interest rate on the loan, what time length would they have to repay it back. They took these courses. And again, what was the benefit? They had ready cash in a bank that they could draw on. They could pay for school fees. They could pay for medical bills. They could be independent on how they treated their family, their community, and their ability to grow. It was a great project. And we were happy to do an evening presentation on Pennies for Prosperity in Bristol Hall. And that's me. So thank you for that. Those are just two things we did in the past. Very successful. Again, making us aware of what the potential for Episcopal Relief and Development can do for families, and raising some money for them as well. Rick?
Okay, a couple more highlights. All Saints Church, Phyllis, that was a great presentation, Phyllis. Thanks so much. In 2012, we engaged in the Nets for Life campaign and raised over $1,600. Each net cost $12. And by my math, we provided nets to 136 families in Africa. And if you figure maybe four members per family, I'd like to think that we saved over 500 lives potentially in Africa with those nets. So I'd like everybody to just think about that just for a moment, that we've actually saved people's lives. So I think that's a great thing that we did. Another project was addressing human trafficking. And we had two projects with that. In 2014, we had an evening program where we showed the film Tricked, and which talked about human trafficking in rather graphic terms. And that resulted in fundraising for over $2,000. And that went to Polaris Project, which is an American organization which addresses human trafficking. And in 2017, we had an educational evening on human trafficking. And we had a representative from the State Division of Criminal Justice, Kathy Fries, from the Human Trafficking Task Force, and she made a presentation and showed some films and other resources to our group. And although that was not even designated or intended to be a fundraising event, it was more an educational evening, that resulted in us collecting over $2,400, which again, that money went to Polaris Project, I believe. So All Saints has been very responsive, and I'm so grateful that we've been able to do so much over the last 10 years or so. And by our calculations, Phyllis and Ned and I were comparing notes. It looks like we've raised over $36,000. And here's, thank you, Mary Frances. There's a little graphic year by year of the totals of what we've done with these projects. And if anybody would like to have any of these resources that we're showing you, just email me, and I'd be happy to send this information to you. I'm not sure if anyone in the group has any questions, but we'll try to answer any questions that anyone might have.
All right, go ahead. You're
Okay.
on.
Phyllis brought to my mind something that we used to do years ago. We got some kind of a box. It was a bank, but it was a cardboard box, but it was a bank. We were supposed to put it on our kitchen windowsill and every so often be thankful for something and put money in that box, which in turn went to help the needy. And I don't know if you all remember that, but I was interested in knowing, they don't do that anymore. And I think that was very helpful to helping the needy, those boxes that we kept putting money in.
You are right. That was a project across the Episcopal Church, and actually does still exist. And Barbara Tuzio can tell us about it.
Right. That was and still is the United Thank Offering. And the Women's Guild is going to arrange for a collection for that during Lent. We'll discuss it at our meeting. Last year, the boxes were out and some people did take them. And mine is pretty full, but I think because we cannot obtain the boxes this year, we're just going to ask for a collection for the United Thank Offering. And that is an Episcopal-wide charity. It's for the whole country. And it is similar in the grants that they have. The only one I can think of right now that was close to home was at St. Mary's. It helped to fund they had like an overnight facility for people to stay in if they were in need. So we'll share some information about that. But that is, years ago, they used to call it the Mite Box, M-I-T-E, and you put your pennies in it. But it's still in existence, Jean. And so you can save your change and then on our collection day, write a check for the amount. And if you want to get rid of your change, I guess you have to bring it to the bank. Does that answer your question?
Jean is talking, but she's muted, Scott.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
But I'm finished.
Yeah.
Mary Frances.
Okay, just one second, Richard. I want to say one thing about United Thank Offering. United Thank Offering is a historic program of the Episcopal Church, not connected to Episcopal Relief and Development, but this gives you an idea of the breadth of the mission and ministry of this kind of work that has always existed in the Episcopal Church. United Thank Offering was founded by Julia Chester Emery. I can't even remember the date, but it's centuries ago. And it does disperse annual grants, and those grants go around the world. I have been in a school in Zambia, an elementary school in Zambia that was built with a grant from the United Thank Offering. I've also been in 2 schools in Haiti that were built with United Thank Offering grants. And so it is money that goes not only in the Episcopal Church, which of course is over 17 countries, including Haiti, but it also has a component of its annual grants go to Anglican Communion partners around the world. So, and Barbara, you and I can talk. There might be a way to mail people the boxes because they fold flat.
That's true. Yeah.
So let's talk about what might be left in the from last year.
I know where they are.
Great.
The boxes.
Okay. Let's you and I talk and get Linda involved, and we can see what we can do, because having that box on your windowsill or on your dresser in the bedroom is a great way to see it and think, every time I'm thankful, I put a couple of coins in the box. Cool.
Right. And it does add up.
It does. My box is heavy too. Richard.
Yes, I just wanted to make a few comments. I was involved, as Phyllis had mentioned, with the All Saints EPD, the Episcopal Relief and Development Fund. I was involved a little bit later when I retired after about 2013. And I was drawn to the Episcopal Relief and Development because the small, as a graph was showing, almost all the money goes to the charity, and they use very little is taken out for administration and so forth. And there's so many charities in this country who the majority of the money collected goes to the administration, never really goes to the recipients of the charity. So the Episcopal Relief and Development is top of my list in that regard. And it was one of the more rewarding projects which I have done for All Saints. I think it was Pennies to Prosperity. I think I was involved. I didn't get involved. I wasn't there for Goats for Guatemala or Nets for Life, but and I like the idea of the Pennies for Prosperity because it was directed primarily to women in impoverished communities all around the world. And you think about it, women are left at home to raise the children. That is their main goal, is to stay at home and raise the children. And they cannot usually contribute to the economics, the income of the family. And the men, because they're out working, they become the dominant figure. And women are almost looked down upon because of this relationship. And giving women a loan, a small amount of money, that they can start something right in their home, weaving baskets, making fabrics, growing crops, and they would start small with a small amount of money, and if they're successful with it, they would repay their loan and be able to borrow more money. Entrepreneurial, just right in your face. And as a result, they became breadwinners in their community, in their family. They gained respect in their family and in the community. So I thought it was a really interesting project that the Episcopal Relief and Development undertook. And one other side that I learned from it was that as Phyllis had talked about animals, goats, chickens, bees, they're more sustainable in these impoverished communities than agricultural crops, because agriculture, you're always at the whim of the environment, the droughts and other things that come along. With an animal, not so much. If you buy a goat, you can have milk from the goat. You can have goat cheese. You can hook up a cart and carry what you manufacture in your home to market, to sell the products. So very interesting. I'd like to see All Saints get actively involved when we're back in the church in the Episcopal Relief and Development, because I think it's just such a fine worldwide. And it's so rewarding to be involved with this and know that you're helping the poor people, doing God's work and Jesus' work right up front. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And of course, even in 2020, under the leadership of the Outreach Committee, we've been contributing to various Episcopal Relief and Development projects. And so, yes, that you all have a great legacy of that. And it is a good thing to continue as you go forward into the future. Are there any other questions? I have just a couple of photos to show you all that might help illustrate some of what we've been talking about. But if there's any, I don't want to cut off questions before we finish here. I'm just looking at folks' screens. Okay, let me do that real quick, and just gives you sort of a visual idea of what we're talking about here with real folk. And okay, hang on one second here. Let me open up these photos and then I'll share my screen. Okay. So this is, the color is not great on this. This is a young woman who is receiving her net. This is her net right here in this bag. She's being talked to by a woman who works in this is in Zambia, at the Livingstone, Zambia Episcopal or Anglican Church. They had a huge event one day. This is back in 2007. A huge event in which they kicked off their Nets for Life campaign, and it involves distributing nets, but not just distributing the nets and letting people go off on their own. It also involves recruiting local Anglicans, mostly, sometimes not all, just Anglicans, local Anglicans, including these women down here, are part of the Mothers Union, which is a major force in the Anglican Communion. They are like Episcopal Church women in the Episcopal Church, but the Mothers Union is all over the Anglican Communion. They recruit local people to teach parents how to hang their nets in their homes, how to wash them. These are treated nets, so they have an insecticide or a repellent in the net. They frankly have a large campaign that tries to convince men that and women that these are not for fishing, because early on they were having problems with people taking them and using them to go fishing. Let me go to the next. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back for a minute. This is also from that day of the distribution in Livingstone, Zambia. This is a grandmother with her grandson in her mud, actually it was mud and cement block house. This is in a little town called Ngwenya. And you can see the net is up behind her there, covering this bed. And she talked how many people in her family, when she was growing up, many children died of malaria. And how grateful she was to learn about nets and then receive one. As you all know, malaria is the largest killer of children under 5 in sub-Saharan Africa. During that rollout, there was a huge parade. The Zambian Air Force Band was there, and there was the governor of the province was there. The mayor of both Livingstone and Ngwenya were there. And this was all about the Anglican Church providing the leadership to fight not only against malaria, but as you can see, HIV and AIDS, which is still rampant in some parts of Africa. Let me we've jumped to the other side of the country. I want to find one other picture for you. This is another one, the Livingston Anglican Parish. Malaria kills, sleep under a treated net. It's a little hard to see there, but, and here's another one, making a difference in children's lives. And you see this fellow here, again, the light is not very good, but he has a t-shirt that calls him a malaria control agent. And those are the people who go among their neighbors and educate their neighbors about how to hang their nets, why to use them. This is in Ghana, and we went to, I can't remember what year this was, but this is on my experience with the pilgrimage that Bishop Jennifer talked about. This was a huge gathering of local people, including chiefs, because one thing ERD does when they come into an area and partner with the Anglicans in that area is the first thing they do is they go and talk to the leaders about the importance of sleeping under nets. Because they know, just like in this country, if you get the leaders on your side and talking about it, more people will adopt these processes. So these fellows, who were all malaria control agents, were doing a skit about how to hang a net and why it was important to sleep under a net. Let me go back this way. Now, also, when I was in Ghana, this is a good example of microloans. These young women had, and it was on a very windy day, you can see some of their skirts being blown. The wind was coming from behind them. These young women had all graduated from a dressmaking school. And they were being, this was their graduation ceremony. And as part of this project, which was a ERD sponsored project with the local diocese in Ghana, they all received these sewing machines, which to us look sort of ancient, but with those, and because they were graduates now of this dressmaking course, they could take out microloans to buy fabric and thread and buttons and all that sort of thing. They were all going to become dressmakers and tailors in their local communities. And these dresses were their final graduation project. And you can see a little more of the incredible workmanship that these young women put into their trade. Another microloan project was this fellow who I keep going past. This fellow who, his name, I'm sorry, I cannot remember. He is not very mobile, but he makes incredible baskets that he borrows money on a microloan for the materials and the dye to color, excuse me, the dye to color the materials he uses. And then his friends help him sell them in marketplaces and other tourist locations in his neighborhood. And I just have one last, oh, this is a nice picture. It speaks to the mothers and children, women and children priorities. These young women were part of a parenthood class, an infant health class in Bulgatanga, and they were there for their weekly course. And also the babies get weighed and examined to make sure they're thriving, and they talk about nutrition and they get assistance in nutrition. And again, it's a partnership between Episcopal Relief and Development and the ADRO, Anglican Diocese Development and Relief Organization in the Diocese of Bulgatanga. And this is, now we're in Haiti, but this is a good example of the notion of, if you have a plow of your own, you're not dependent upon when your neighbors aren't using it so that you can borrow it. And in this case, it's not a donkey, but it's an ox. But this fellow's community had just gotten this plow and they had purchased it together. They all had shares in the plow. And he was the first person to begin plowing this field so that he could prepare it for planting. This was outside of Lake High in Haiti. on a trip I took with, this is then presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shorey here, and a number of other people. We went to Haiti about 8 months before the earthquake, actually, to look at a number of Episcopal Relief and Development projects, as well as to conduct some business of the Episcopal Church, because the presiding bishop is expected to visit every diocese in the Episcopal Church. And of course, Haiti is one of our dioceses, belongs to the same province that we do, Province 2. And by numbers, it's the largest, by number of members, it's the largest diocese in the Episcopal Church. So I'm going to stop my screen share and come back to you. And Jeremy, I see a hand raised.
Yes, Mary Frances, I'm wondering if there is a link on e-giving to contribute
To
ERD.
There isn't specifically, and Phyllis can say a bit more about this. We tend to put a link up on e-giving when there's a specific ERD related project that Outreach has decided to become a part of. You can always go to episcopalrelief.org and contribute there. If you go on there today, you'll see that they're asking for donations to help the work they're doing in among the dioceses in Texas and elsewhere that have been so horribly hit by the recent storms. Phyllis, can you say anything more about that?
I will say just a word or two. In recent years, we have tended to raise money in the United States for Episcopal Relief and Development, basically related to natural disasters. We started in a way heavily with the chili cook-off, which was incredibly successful. We raised over $7,700. And we split that between 2,000 to Texas for Hurricane Harvey, 2,000 to ERD for Florida for Hurricane Irma, I think, and 2,000 to Puerto Rico for Hurricane Maria. And those were gifts to the ERD so that they could begin and continue the restoration work that they do. And they do a tremendous job. And I will put in a tip for you, Mary Frances, because you're the one who handed over to me a list of people to contact about Texas. And they came through 100%. Everyone got back to me. Everyone I left a message with, they were responsive. They had ideas, and they helped us a lot on that. So we have tended in recent times to use ERD funds on domestic problems as opposed to worldwide ones right now. But we're, when a tragedy occurs, we're wide open. So we do think of ERD, and we think of them because A, they are so efficient in using their money, and B, we have confidence that they work with the people on the ground. In many countries, as much as possible, they will always deal with the government, but their first or their equal choice is to go to the village, to go to the community, to go to the church, the bishop that's located there, and get direction there. A bishop is going to say, this village needs nets, whereas this village needs a well, as opposed to just dumping money into the government of that country and hoping they'll find what's necessary per area. So, but we, as I say, we're open to worldwide activity as well. We have in the past.
And Phyllis raises Jeremy. Phyllis raises a good point in that, and this isn't always easy for some of us here to understand, but ERD and the Episcopal Church itself, in its various kinds of relief efforts, defaults to the local folk. And as Phyllis said, wants to hear what they say they need. Now, for instance, after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, devastation, right? We saw the newsreels. I was there maybe 7 or 8 months afterwards. we saw how horrible it was. It completely destroyed the historic Holy Trinity Cathedral in Port-au-Prince. And it was a historic UNESCO art patrimonial treasure because of the murals that had been painted inside the cathedral. And there was all sorts of other need. You know, schools had been destroyed, people's homes had been destroyed, but the cathedral had been a gathering point, not just for Anglican or for Episcopalians in Haiti, but for the nation. And so they said they wanted their first priority. They could take care of rebuilding their schools and with local help and that sort of thing, but they wanted to rebuild the cathedral. And there were a lot of people in the US part of the Episcopal Church who were like, why would you spend that money on a building when your people are in need? But it was symbolic for them of the loss of their heritage and wanting to recover their place in the life of not just of Port-au-Prince, but in the life of the nation. And the music programs that were based there, the school that was based there, and the art programs that were based there. And so sometimes it's challenging for folks, I found it challenging in my work with Episcopal News Service to sometimes understand the priorities of Episcopalians and Anglicans in other parts of the world. But it is very clear that if we're going to build resiliency and we're going to aid long-term development, we can't impose what we think should happen. Now, that's not to say that there weren't strict financial controls on money that went to Haiti, and ERD actually paid for 5 or 6 years of a coordinator for its relief efforts, so that the money came through this coordinator who was a former UN disaster relief employee who had worked all over the world. But it was to talk about what those Episcopalians how they wanted to rebuild their country and their churches and their lives. I'm aware that it's 5 after 12, and I'm really appreciative for all of you who stayed on, and my many thanks to Rick and Phyllis for helping with this. I kind of sent an email and said, what do you think we could do about this? And they took and ran with it. So if there isn't anything else, I'm going to say, let's meet again here next week. Does that sound good? All right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good week. Stay positive. Test negative.
Thanks.
God bless you all.